So, Oliver, are you ready to talk about everybody's favorite topic, artificial intelligence and the impact on, well, not just life, the universe, and everything, but specifically in recruiting? Now, this is a hot topic, and it's often been likened to a bit of an arms race. In that, on the one side, we've got the corporates and the small companies and the hiring platforms increasing the use of AI for screening and ranking and rating. And on the other side, we've got candidates using ChatGPT to figure out what is being requested and then keyword stuff their applications and so on, and then have them write their own CVs, etc. And it's doing this all the time. So very open question, to take this where you will, because it is a hot topic. But I guess pros, cons, for it, against it, how would you suggest people approach this whole topic? And again, given your unique position of working both sides of the fence, I guess I was going to ask you who's winning, but I don't think it's a fair question. I guess a better question would be to see what are some of the common downfalls of over-reliance on both sides.
Wow, that's a big topic, and there's a huge amount, as you say, that's been made of it in recent times. And if I was to believe any of it, 2 years ago, a year ago, last week, then I wouldn't be in recruitment anymore, because apparently AI was going to replace everyone and everything. And there was a real fear around that. But let's not forget that recruitment is about people. And for me, the human interface between person, whether you're a recruiter with a candidate with a potential employer, the human interface is never going to be replaced. So I think that would be my first comment. First and foremost, let's not forget the importance of that person-to-person interaction. Let's accept and acknowledge that AI, and not just AI, but technology, has a massive part to play in improving efficiencies in certain areas, time saving, and of course can handle repetitive tasks at ease. So there are elements of recruitment that I think technology and AI, at the end of the day, if you look at the metrics on which most people consider hiring success, it's time to hire, it's retention, it's cost of recruitment. So in many respects, technology and AI can drive all of those down and improve all of them. But I think from a candidate perspective, I think it's really important to be aware of how technology is being used now, and it's being used right across, from the minute you see the organization to the minute you leave. AI technology is there, and it's assessing everything. So I think as a candidate in the candidate market, it's good to be aware of that, because if you're just thinking about writing a CV, for example, companies and probably smaller stage businesses are utilizing these technologies less because of the costs, and also they just don't have the volume that they're processing. But even still, if a company is using AI to rank candidates, for example, then all they've got is the CV and the context within that CV. I haven't seen anything yet that's clever enough to really go away and then say, right, who's it working for? What's that organizational profile like compared to us? And then base that on that whole CV. That will be coming without doubt, where they look at that whole employment background, they go and look at the organizations, and they really build up a really true picture. It's coming quickly, and there are elements of it out there. And I think when they get to that, then you might be able to take it quite seriously and to an extent. And we'll talk about the cautions in a minute. But I think candidates just need to be mindful of that when they're writing their CVs. And if technology is being used to evaluate skills, for example, make sure the relevant skills are on your CV. Make sure it's within your cover letter, and it's basic stuff, but it's important stuff. So I think that's quite a key thing to think about. And I think obviously on the client side, the same applies. People fall through the gaps because the CV might not be constructed in the right way. The right words might not be on there. So, you might be overlooking the best candidate just because you're relying on technology to evaluate your talent pool. So my first principle is always, you've got to still include that human element to make the more critical decisions, apply the critical thinking, if you like. Otherwise, you do run the risk of walking away from a situation and or a job because technology says no. And I think, that I wouldn't yet feel confident in putting my faith in that. I use AI not that regularly, mainly for task automation, taking interview notes, for example, stuff like that. It can be incredibly useful. But I certainly wouldn't let technology say yes or no to a hire. I think that the human has to have the final decision.
Yeah.
Without it.
So you've touched on a couple of points there that it brings its own concept of bias into the hiring process. And
We're trying to avoid bias in recruitment, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
you've got to look at AI and how these algorithms are built. If they're
Yeah.
built in a certain way, that's going to be reflected in a certain way. And one common thing is, from the candidate side, if you're relying on ChatGPT, for example, if you're relying on an older model, it's going to be referencing older data, and it might be referencing out of date data and links. So you've got to be really careful about how you use it, and you've got to validate everything that you do. Ultimately, I think still.
Yeah. So for a candidate, where is the sweet spot of making use of these AI tools? Like, what is the advantage, I guess? Because we just talked about, there's this risk of using outdated models and so on. One of the other risks is obviously sounding like you're just a ChatGPT. The ubiquity of they all sound the same, etc. So what tips or advice would you give to candidates who are looking to use AI in their job search?
Well, I think it's really useful for the transitions, right? Because if you're looking to, you've identified some markets that you really resonate with you. You might want to go and work in agri-tech, or you might want to work in the circular economy in a particular space. There's so many organizations out there all the time growing. So AI can be really useful from a market research perspective, market analysis perspective, competitor analysis perspective. You can quite quickly build target lists of organizations that you might want to work for. Obviously, you've got other tools, LinkedIn and other business networks and directories within this space that you can refer to as well. But AI can quite quickly bring all that together in one place for you. It can tabulate it. It can put it in a spreadsheet. It can really save you an awful lot of time. So I'd say from a market research perspective, it can be very powerful. I think without doubt, it can be useful as well from a first draft perspective. If you want to look at CVs, you want to look at covering letters. But again, as I said earlier, always put some context into that. Is it written in your own language? Have you asked GPT to read stuff you've written before to write in the same language? You can train it to do that. But again, I go back to my earlier point about due diligence. If you could knock out a cover letter and a CV in 5 minutes based on the job spec and get GPT to do it for you, is that what I would call due diligence? Probably not. So you've still got to put that human layer into that, and you've still got to contextualize it, make sure you're happy with it. That would, be my big caution on that. But without doubt, I think there are elements of it that are very, very useful.